Welcome back to my channel. Today's presentation is about the foundations of scientific writing. The presentation is a part of a playlist on scientific publishing. I hope you watched previous videos. Well, the audience of today's presentation is mainly early career researchers who are writing their first conference and journal papers, and the overarching aim here is to help you to make your manuscript more organized and clear and readable for others. I'm going to talk about the importance of selecting a journal and selecting a community behind a journal, how to become persuasive in your storytelling when you write a paper, how to organize your work, and how to make a clear writing style. Well, first point I want to share with you about the foundation of scientific writing. The basic foundation of scientific writing is that we write within communities and for communities. So we all, as scientists, are human beings rooted in cultural context. We are not just aliens. We are rooted in cultural context. We are not autonomous. We are directed toward external truths. And being part of a group is so important in the scientific community. This means that when you write, you need to understand this journal is reflecting which community. So when we do this exercise of writing, we ask ourselves, what is the community behind this journal? What are the conferences they attend, and who are those people? So the first thing to do is to start to select a journal that you find that this group of people is supposed to read your work and that you belong to those people. It's very important to not forget that once you're becoming a scientist or a researcher or you are publishing for the first time, you need to associate yourself with a certain group that has a scientific productivity. So the question number one will be always, what is the scientific group that I am part of? Who is the journal community that is strongly related and I am working or linked to so that you can be induced by the research topics and that you follow them. Also, it's very important to adapt your manuscript to the journal's message, because every journal has a message, every journal has a community, every journal has a style. So it's very important that you adopt this writing style and the working way of the journal community to make sure that your article that you're writing will fit well in the community. Another very important foundation of scientific writing is the storytelling. It's very important that you understand that the way that you will tell the story will influence the story being accepted or rejected. Now, in every scientific writing, we can see that storytelling and argumentation are the basis of scientific communication. You bring evidence, you use a logical approach, you justify what you are saying, and based on that, people will accept what you are saying, as long as you are providing sufficient evidence for that and you make sure that you have new insights and novel approaches. Now, as part of the storytelling, we need to understand that when we write a manuscript, we will figure out that a manuscript is a mix between science and communication. Let's see, for example, here this example. We can see that we have in any manuscript a section on the introduction, the literature review, the methods, the finding, and the discussion and the conclusion. And we will find a part which is scientific and some part which is not scientific. When it comes to the non-scientific part, is the communication part, is subjective. This will be the introduction, for example. The introduction is considered as subjective because there is no rules. You are talking about your opinion. Here comes the personal subjectivity. But when we talk about the methodology, it is not subjective. Methodology sections, finding section, and even the content of these methodology and findings, it's pure objective. So you need to understand that part of your work is science and part of your work is communication. Science is represented in the findings and the methodology. Subjectivity is very present in the introduction and in the discussion, and sometimes also in the state of the art. So the introduction section is the most important part of the paper, and therefore it is your access, and because it's subjective, you need to take care to write it in a convincing way. The introduction is your opening, and it needs to have a certain sequence so that you write in this sequence. And in most of the sequences that we use in scientific writing is that we start first with a setup, then we move to a conflict, and then we move to the resolution. This is the way to write a good introduction. When we talk about the setup, we are talking about the topic. So you start to explore the background and the problem, mainly the background of the topic, bibliographically. Then you move to the conflict part where you are starting to reveal the problem, and here you start to introduce the problem in a good way so that people start to understand why this is important. And then you start to come up with a resolution, which will be that your work here is coming as part of the solution to this problem or a contribution to solve this problem. So you come up with a different point of view or a novel point of view or a resolution to this confrontation that was discussed earlier on the conflict or on the problem level. So you need to understand this is the way introductions are written. Now this is an example for a paper we wrote in 2019. I advise you to download it and read it, and you can see that we wrote the introduction with the same approach. We started with a setup, then a conflict, and the resolution. And this example is not an invention from my side. You find that most scientists using this technique. So we can start that we see here talking about the present and the future of sustainability, the environment. This is number one. And this whole paragraph is mainly about the setup. And then number two, we start with a however. However is always the beginning of the conflict. So even all what has been done or all these efforts, the background, we start to go with point number two, which is the problem. So we start here to list the problem and enrich the listing with sufficient references. And finally, we start to come up with the resolution. We start to talk about our paper. We say, in this paper, we adopt a dual approach. In this paper, we present something new. In this paper, we do this or that. And by that, we are offering a solution, a better understanding of a methodology, whatever kind of novelty that we are coming up to address this problem that was stated in point number two. So this is the way how you write a good introduction and follow the logical storytelling like we see. We start with the background and blah blah and blah blah and then but and blah blah and finally therefore. So this is very famous. It's called the and, but, therefore, or sometimes the and, however, therefore. So these are the ways that you structure your introduction. Now, as part of storytelling, you need to understand that a good manuscript is a mix between subjectivity and objectivity, between science and communication. And as I mentioned earlier, the subjectivity will be present in the discussion and in the introduction and in the state of the art. So the discussion is also important, and this section requires that you show the added value of your research. So you need to come up and discuss the findings and the recommendations. What are the findings of your work and what are the recommendations you are recommending to the professionals in the field? Then you need to talk about the contribution of your own work and the strengths of your work and what are the limitations of your work. And finally, you talk about the implications on practice, on policy, and the future work in relation to your work. Those are also three subsections that must be included in the storytelling of any discussion. You talk about the achievement and the recommendations, strengths and limitations, future work and implications. This is also very important to take into account so that your storytelling in these two subjective areas, the introduction and the discussion, is complying with best practices. Now let's move to the following point, which is the organization. The third important and essential point in any foundation of scientific writing is that you have an organized manuscript. The scientific community is very conservative and it evolved over years, hundreds of years, writing in a specific way. Don't try to change it because this is the way we standardized over long years and this is the way we understand better the content. So we are using always the IMRaD approach, which is starting with the introduction, literature review, method, results, discussion and conclusion. And this IMRaD approach is how scientific communities have this tradition to package and shape the information in a specific way. If you are deciding to package the information in a different way, the paper will be directly rejected. And it's important to not challenge editors or reviewers in this regard, because like I mentioned earlier, they are very conservative. The whole scientific community is conservative, and this is the way we write. So don't combine the results of discussion or combine the literature reviews introduction unless you have little material, for example, in the literature review. But results must be separate, discussion must be separate, and you must have a conclusion section. So in general, when we talk about organization, you have to ask yourself how to write a paper that gets cited, how you write it in a way that will get cited. First of all, you have to use this IMRaD as a simple way in the standardized structure for how a scientific paper is best presented. And this is the way that you do it. You start with the introduction, you answer the why, the review is what happened before, why, the how will be in the methods, and the results will be the what, and finally you have the so what in the discussion, like I mentioned earlier. So the structure is so important because it will be funneling the reader in a certain sequence, and don't forget that all readers, they have an expectation for this structure. If they find a different structure or a missing element of the structure, this will be a reason for not understanding what was done, what was the background, and missing a lot of information, as a consequence, misinterpreting the work and its quality. Now let's move to the last part and the final part of today's presentation, talking about clarity and the importance of clarity as the fourth pillar of scientific writing. Well, clarity is very important because it's about scientific writing is about clear communication, so don't come up with your unique mode of communication or your unique jargon and bombard the readers with your abbreviations. Try to be effective through visualization and table. Use basic language. If you are using technical terms, refer to ISO or international standards language so that you are not using specific terminology of your group or in your country. Make it universal language. Follow a structured writing and paragraph construction. Use good English writing quality and check for proofreading, whether by colleagues or by paid services or by software. Make sure that your writing is dense, to the point. Avoid the long descriptions along the long blah blah. Go to the point. It's a scientific work. You are talking here about finding, about a methodology, about insights. Make it simple, avoid repetition, and avoid any extra word and any fillings, and avoid to be verbose, especially if you have a budget of words that you need to respect. So these are the advices for writing clarity. Well, this is the end of today's presentation. Here are some takeaway before leaving. Well, the main key takeaway here is that the foundation of scientific writing is that scientific writing is a mix between science, solid science that is clearly objective, facts, figures, numbers, findings, and communication, which is subjective, human, storytelling based. You need to understand that, number one, the community will bring value to your work. So if you have a community backing your work, it is the one that will judge your work. And the only way to bring value to your work is to bring your work as close as possible to the community that you are going to submit your work in their journal. So the deeper the problem understanding is, the more meaningful the story is, and the closer the problem is to the community, and it is defined already by the community, and you are attending the conferences of the community, you are reading the articles of the community, you understand how this community thinks, what are their concerns, and you are aligning your work with the community, the higher the value of your work will be, and the more it will be appreciated when you submit it. Number two, storytelling is so important because this is your only way to persuade others about the importance and relevance of your work. So please write your introduction and your discussion following the advices that I shared with you, following the logic of and, but, therefore, or and, however, therefore, and also for the discussion, have always your findings and recommendations followed by the strengths and limitation, finally followed by the implication on practice and policy and the future work. By that you have a higher communication content in the introduction section and in the discussion section. When it comes to organization, follow the IMRaD. This is clear, straightforward. Don't improvise, just comply and make your best to make it clear, and based on that others will understand easier. And communicate as much as possible clearly. Use simple plain English, use technical terms that are well defined in references so that you don't have conflict about the meaning of certain words or terminology, and in the same time keep the text short, to the point. Don't avoid being verbose. Well, this is the end of today's presentation on the foundation of scientific writing. I hope the presentation was useful. This is a presentation part of a playlist on scientific publishing. I hope you watch next videos. Don't hesitate to comment in the comment bar down in the video if you have questions, if you have any remarks, if you have any suggestions. I will always look at these comments, and I'm looking forward for future videos. Today's presentation was about the foundation of scientific writing. Take the time to watch this video 1 or 3 or 4 times so that you understand the whole idea behind it, and from there you can have a very high quality articles. Good luck with your writing, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.